Any questions on any of the homework assignments or the homework assignment from yesterday? No? If not, we're going to look at the set of factors today, the ones that we're going to work on today. Now, the main difference from what we did yesterday to what we're doing today is that A is not going to be 1. And in the few cases that we had yesterday where we did actually have a value of A or a number in front of the term that's squared, it ended up factoring out. It ended up being one of the greatest common factors that we could factor out. And we went back to having the number in front of the variable that is squared being 1. Well, see if it'll let me erase. Nope. Try again. Nope. There we go. So, when we look at this one here, is there a greatest common factor between 7x squared, 31x, and 20? No, because 7 and 20 are not divisible, and 7 is a prime number. It doesn't have any factors besides 1 and 7. So we can move on to step number 2, which is our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. And what we want to find next is the signs. And to be able to find the sign, we look at the third term, and our third term is negative, so the signs are opposite. So one is going to be positive and one is going to be negative. One's going to be positive and one is going to be negative. So that takes care of the signs in step number 3. Our fourth step is to find the factors of the first and third term. Now, x squared, well, the only factors of x squared are x and x. The factors of 7 are 1 and 7. So 7 and 1, 1 and 7, it really doesn't matter which way we put it. We just need to pick one and go with it. Now, if you did put 1x, that's perfectly fine. Now, the factors of 20 are, well, 1 and 20, 2 and 10, and 4 and 5. Now we just need to see which one of these do we want to try first. 4 and 5. Which one do we want to put first? 4 or 5? Doesn't matter. 5. 5 and 4. Because it really doesn't matter which one we do first, because we're always going to check to make sure that it does work out. So 7x times negative 4 is going to be negative 28x. 5 times x is going to be plus 5x, which gives us negative 23x. Yes. Since that's not what we're looking for, we can switch to 4 and 5. So we can put 4 and 5 and then try this again. So we can say 7 times negative 5, which will give us negative 35x. And 4 times x is going to be plus 4x. And negative 35x plus 4x is negative 31x. And is that what we're looking for? Yep. So these here would be the factors of this polynomial here. Any questions on any of this here so far? We're good with this here? Okay. We can look at this one here. Now, there was one on the homework that didn't factor at all, and there was one that just had a greatest common factor that we had to pull out. It would be kind of nice if we had a method for being able to determine if they are factorable or if they're not. And we actually do. And that is with our b squared minus 4ac. I've not actually seen this written down in a textbook for using to determine if it is factorable. Most just say we're going to keep trying every single option, and if we run out of all possible setups to be able to factor, then it's not factorable. This here, this equation will actually be able to tell us if it is factorable or not. And we get A, B, and C from the equation itself, because B in this case would be what? 17 minus 4. A would be 2 and C would be 21, because we're going off the general equation for a quadratic, ax squared plus bx plus c. Now, we can plug this straight into a calculator, and it really doesn't matter which one we use, because I'm not really too focused on what the number is and utilizing it. I'm more focused on what kind of answer I get, because if I get anything besides a whole number, it's not factorable. And if it does give me a whole number, it's telling me that this is factorable. And this here should give us a whole number, 11. Okay? So since it doesn't have a decimal, it doesn't have I, and it doesn't have a square root left over, because if we're using the yellow calculator, it could give us a square root, leave it in radical form. If we get any of those, well, it's not factorable. Here it gave us a whole number, so it means that it is. Does anybody notice where this comes from? The quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So really, when we had answers that were kind of more complex, really the complex part, or the part that made it not a whole number, came from this part here. So if this works out to be a whole number, okay, the answers are going to be kind of whole number or fractional, which means we can factor. So that's kind of a way that we can check to see if it is factorable or not. So this one is. Now, I can tell you right now there's not a greatest common factor between 2b squared, 17b, and 21. So we can do our two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Now, when we look at the third term, it is positive, so the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term, which is also positive. So we can say plus and plus. Which leaves us to the factors of the first and third term. Well, again, so we have 2b squared. Well, b squared's only factors are b and b. And 2's only factors are 2 and 1, so we just can put 2, and we have this here. Now we need to look at the factors of 21. That. Well, 1 and 21, 4, 3, and 7. Which one do we want to try first? Three and 7. Which one do we want to put in first? 3, 7. And last but not least, we can check to see if this works. 2b times 7 is 14b. 3 times b is going to be plus 3b, and 14b plus 3b is 17b, which is exactly what we wanted. So that right there is the correct answer. Any questions on this here? Almost the exact same thing as what we did yesterday, just having numbers in front of the variables. Let's look at this one here. Is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? Well, 7 and 28 do have a greatest common factor of 7, yes? Does 7 go into 45 evenly? Well, no. 7 times 7 is 49. That's too close to 45. It won't have a common factor. Unfortunately, there's not a greatest common factor between these three terms. It'd be nice because it does make the number smaller and a little bit easier to work with. Now, when we look at negative 28, since the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. Really doesn't matter which one we put first. I just have a habit of putting plus first. Now we need to look at the factors of 7x squared and 28. Well, 7x squared, factors of x squared are x and x, and the factors of 7 are, well, 7 and 1. Now there are a few more factors of 28, but we do have 1 and 28, 2 and 14. 3 doesn't work, but 4 and 7, 4 and 7. Does it matter which one we put in first? So we can say 7 and 4. Yeah, we'll have to switch it. Because looking at this here, does 7x plus 7 have a greatest common factor between those two terms? Yep, exactly. Since there's not a greatest common factor to begin with, we can't have one here. We can't have one in either the parentheses if there's not one to begin with. Now, if you do get to some setups, some of the problems, and no matter how you set it up, there's always a greatest common factor in one of the sets of parentheses, look back at the original problem to see maybe there could be one there. Does that make sense? So that's one good way to kind of check to see if there is one. So we can't have it set up this way, but we can still use 7 and 4. We just have to flip it, put 4 and 7. And if we try this here, 7x times negative 7 is negative 49x. 4 times x is going to be plus 4x, which gives us negative 45x. Is that what we wanted? Yes. So these here would be the two sets of factors. Any questions on any of this here? We feel kind of comfortable with this here? Do we need to see another example for one of these here? Feel comfortable with this one? Feel good with this one here? That's similar. Let's look at this one here. Because this one here is a little bit different, not a whole lot, just a little bit. Is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? Give you a hint and say yes, there is. What can we say can go into all three? I can say 2 for sure because they are all even. 4, yes. Do we think there's a bigger number than 4? No, I think 4 is good because it would be tempting to say 8 because 16 and 80 are both divisible by 8, but 28 unfortunately is not. Is there anything else that will go into all three? Yeah, we can have n squared, because since they all do have at least 2 variables in them, because n to the fourth has 4 n's, n cubed has 3, and n squared has 2. Since they all have at least 2, we can actually pull it out as well. So we can have a greatest common factor of not just a number, but a variable too. And if we factor this out, 28 divided by 4 is 7. Okay, that kind of confirms that we can't use 8 because 7 is prime. Now, n to the fourth divided by n squared, we're really taking 2 of them away from the 4, which leaves us with n squared plus. 16 divided by 4 is 4 n. If we have 3 n's and we take 2 away, we're left with 1 minus 20. Because our 480 divided by 4 would be 20. And n squared divided by n squared would be just 1. So we'd have 20 times 1, which is just going to be 20. Now, when we look at this next part here, we need to find the signs. Because we can go on and set it up as 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces, because there's not any other greatest common factor. Now, since the 20 is negative, our signs are going to be opposite. One's going to be positive, and one is going to be negative. Now we need to find the factors of the first and third term. Well, 7n squared, and we know we'll have n and n as well as 7 and 1. Because n squared, the only factors for n squared are going to be n, and the only factors of 7 are 7 and 1. 20, on the other hand, does have several sets of factors. Because we have 1 and 20, 2 and 10, or 4 and 5. Which one do we want to use? Which one do we want to try first? And 10. So I can go on and just plug them in, and we can check this here. So we can do 7n times negative 10, which would be negative 70n. Plus 2n is negative 68n. Yeah, we're going to have to switch the signs and change the numbers. Now, if we flip, if we just flip 2 and 10, 10 and 2, I about rewrote the same thing, and do the multiplication. 7n times negative 2 would be negative 14n. 10 times n is going to be plus 10n, which gives us negative 4n, which is the correct number, but wrong sign, because we want positive, not negative. So we can switch the signs, make this positive. Let's see if it'll let me erase. Oh, so close. I was so convinced it wasn't going to. Minus, and when we do this here, it will give us the correct one, because we would have positive 14n, and negative 10 times n would be negative 10n, which would give us our positive 4n that we wanted. So we not only had to flip the two numbers, we also had to change the sign. And so this here would be the correct answer. Any other questions on this here? We good with this here? Any other questions on anything we've covered so far? Do you feel pretty comfortable with this here? All right. Look at the other ones in the note sheet. If there's one of those that we want to look at or y'all want to see, we can do that. Yeah, we can do this one here. Now, when we look at this one here, there is a greatest common factor that we do need to pull out. What is in common with all three terms? B. Anything else? Because we do have the 230s on the end, yes? So we know that 30 is divisible by both 2, 3, 5, 6, and 10. Is 87 divisible by 2? No. How about 3? So we can say that the greatest common factor here is 3b, and that's the biggest that it's going to be. And we can factor this out of all three. Well, 30 divided by 3 is 10. N squared, because we didn't mess with n. And then the b factors out completely. Minus 87 divided by 3 is 29. N, and again, the b factors out completely. And lastly, we're going to have plus 10. As it works out on all three of these, that the b factored out completely because we only had one of them in each spot. Now, there aren't any other like terms between these three here. It just ended up being the 3b, which we already factored out. And since we factored out all the like terms, we can go on and factor with 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Now, since the 10 is positive, the third term is positive, the signs are the same, and they're going to match the sign of the middle term, which is negative. So we'll have negative and negative. Now, the factors of 10n squared and 10, well, n squared is going to be n and n. Now, the factors of 10, on the other hand, are 1 and 10 or 2 and 5. Which one do we want to try first? One and 10 or 2 and 5? 2 and 5. And at this point, it really doesn't matter which one we put where. We can just put them in, 2 and 5. Well, our third term is actually 10 as well, so the factors are 1 and 10 or 2 and 5. Which one do we want to try first? 10. We'll have to put the 5 first and the 2 second, because again, we can't have any like terms. We already pulled them all out. And lastly, we can check to see if this is the correct setup. Well, 2n times negative 2 is negative 4n. Negative 5 times 5n is negative 25n. And negative 4n minus 25n is negative 29n. Is that what we wanted? Yeah. So right there is the correct answer. Any other questions on any of this here? Okay. If there are no other questions, that is all we are doing today.